This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. For too long, women's serious midlife health issues have been trivialized, ignored, and met with a just deal with it attitude. Many of us have been made to feel ashamed or forgotten. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But here's the powerful truth. It's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI is not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic, founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. What sets MIDI apart? We are the only women's telehealth brand covered by major insurance companies, making high-quality expert care accessible and affordable. Our clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. We offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions, from hormonal therapies and weight loss protocols to lifestyle coaching and preventative health guidance. This isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will join our patients who feel seen, heard, and prioritized. You will find that our mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the health care they deserve. Because we believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.
This is episode 53 of That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Bate, Professor of English Literature and author of The Genius of Shakespeare. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
Whereof, for the encouragement of his posterity, I have therefore assigned this shield or coat of arms. So the application is being granted because John can claim that his ancestors fought for King Henry VII. Bosworth Field, probably, 1485. We know there were 3 soldiers named Shakespeare who fought in that battle. And he's married Mary Arden, whose father is himself a gentleman.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
We are celebrating Shakespeare's birthday this week by taking a look at how Shakespeare became a gentleman. One of the ways William Shakespeare achieved the status of a gentleman was in the procurement of the family coat of arms. This process was something of a mystery because history shows us that Shakespeare's father had been eligible for a coat of arms but never received it. And later, his son William would successfully acquire the arms for the family, presumably a source of pride for his father, as well as a firm establishment of respect and status in their community. This week, we are happy to welcome back to the show for his second time as a guest here at That Shakespeare Life, the distinguished Dr. Paul Edmondson, Head of Research and Knowledge at Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, who joins us to be our guide into the history of Shakespeare's coat of arms, heraldry, and the Shakespeare family. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Cassidy, and it's Shakespeare's birthday.
I know. We're celebrating Shakespeare's birthday today, looking at him becoming a gentleman. Now, when John Shakespeare was actually the first one to inquire about the coat of arms, was that during William's childhood?
It was. William was about 12 years old, and we know about this because in 1596, when an application was made for the coat of arms, it referred to an earlier attempt of 20 years earlier, so about 1576. And John Shakespeare on that occasion was not successful. And then so 20 years passed, his son is up and coming, and there seems to be wealth in the family, and they go back to apply for one, and they're successful in October 1596.
Now, what did the application process look like? Who did he apply to get the coat of arms?
Well, he applied to the Garter King of Arms, and they were based in the College of Heralds, or that's what they used, as it were, an inquiry centre for coats of arms. And you were able to apply for a coat of arms if you could have confirmed within you, as it were, gentlemanly status. You had to be a gentleman in order to have a coat of arms. The Shakespeare family were able to have that confirmed because of the evidence they put forward on that 20th of October, 1596. And John Shakespeare was granted a coat of arms. So it was very much a social practice. It was a highly desirable one. It was a complex one. If you start to pursue Shakespeare and heraldry, there's masses and masses to read on this subject. But it was the College of Heralds that granted the coat of arms.
So explain why it was such a popular thing to do. Why was it worth all this effort to the Shakespeares to get this?
So, Cassidy, you know we are still obsessed with class in the United Kingdom. And this was very much the case in Shakespeare's period. William Harrison, historian, writing in the middle years of Queen Elizabeth I's reign, says, "We in England divide our people commonly into four sorts, as gentlemen, citizens or burgesses, yeomen, and artificers or labourers." So four distinct classes outlined there during Shakespeare's period. He also writes, this is in his historical description, he says, "Whosoever studieth the laws of the realm, whoso abideth in the university, giving his mind to his book, or professeth physic and the liberal sciences, or beside his service in the room of a captain in the wars, or good counsel given at home, whereby his commonwealth is benefited, can live without manual labour, and thereto will bear the port, charge, and countenance of a gentleman. He shall, for money, have a coat of arms bestowed on him by heralds, who in the charter of the same do of custom pretend antiquity and service, and many gay things, and thereunto, being made so good cheap, be called master, which is the title that men give to esquires and gentlemen, and reputed for a gentleman ever hereafter." So you could call yourself master, and if you were doing one of those above activities, such as being at the university, or serving in the wars for your country, or being good in your community, whereby the commonwealth is being benefited, or if you can live without having to earn your money, you can call yourself a gentleman.
So there was a whole list of ways that you could prove your case.
Absolutely. And the Shakespeares do it very thoroughly and very properly. So we have the citation from the College of Heralds for the Shakespeares. John Shakespeare, this is William Dethick, who was Garter King of Arms, who was making possible the grant of the coat of arms on that day, says, "John Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon in the county of Warwick, whose parents and late ancestors were for their valiant and faithful service advanced and rewarded by the most prudent prince, King Henry VII of famous memory, since which time they have continued at those parts in good reputation and credit. And the said John, having married Mary, daughter, and one of the heirs of Robert Arden of Wilmcote in the said county gentleman, whereof, for the encouragement of his posterity, I have therefore assigned this shield or coat of arms." So the application is being granted because John can claim that his ancestors fought for King Henry VII. Bosworth Field, probably, 1485. We know there were 3 soldiers named Shakespeare who fought in that battle. And he's married Mary Arden, whose father is himself a gentleman. And also John is a bailiff of Stratford-upon-Avon, so he's serving his community. That was the year that Shakespeare was born. In 1568-69, he was bailiff of Stratford-upon-Avon. And he also says that his estate is worth £500 in 1596. So it's a very thorough application. They qualify on almost every front, apart from not having gone to university.
Which speaks to how important it was for them.
They really wanted it. And actually, when you contrast their application and the general culture of coats of arms and how other people obtained them, it makes theirs look like a very thorough application.
Well, how much did it cost to get a coat of arms? Was this a significant sum they had to put forth?
Well, yes. I mean, we don't know how much they actually paid, but we see going rates establishing themselves during the period. So the College of Heralds decided that, by 1533, that if you had property and land over £100, remember John Shakespeare's had over £500, your coat of arms would cost you 10 marks, which in Old English is £6, 13 shillings and fourpence. So probably, well, they paid at least that, and it was probably more like £10. People have speculated it might be as high as £20 or even £30 for the Shakespeare coat of arms. I mean, you're getting you're anything above £10. Let's just think about it for a second as half the annual salary of a school teacher in the period.
Quite a significant choice to pursue.
It was expensive, but that also shows the value that was set aside for these things.
Now, if you haven't seen the coat of arms yet, you can see it on display at Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, as well as visible digitally in the collections at Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, which we'll link to in the show notes today. But Paul, please describe for us what this shield looks like.
Well, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It looks as if it's gold. So the description of the Garter King of Arms says gold on a bend sables. That means a black stripe going through it, a spear of the first steeled argent, that's silver, and for his crest or cognizance, a falcon, his wings displayed, argent, standing on a wreath of his colours, supporting a spear gold, steeled as aforesaid, set upon a helmet with mantles and tassels, as hath been accustomed, and doth more plainly appear depicted on this margent. It's a shield,
very brightly coloured,
with a black stripe going through it from top left down to the right, diagonally, and a spear in gold, I think, going through the middle of it, and then an eagle on top of it. Was
it the Shakespeare family that designed this shield?
No, the herald would have designed it for them, and the motto "non sans droit," not without right, on the shield, which bears out very much them having done it so thoroughly. They have every right to this shield, this coat of arms. One of the things that the herald had to be careful of was that the coat of arms that he was designing, granting, was not like any other coat of arms that had gone before. They all had to be different, like snowflakes. And there was a complaint a few years later that Shakespeare's coat of arms was too similar to one, granted earlier to Lord Morley. And then the herald comes back and defends that complaint and says, well, actually, it is quite different. And you look at Morley's shield and it doesn't have a spear going through it, for example. Also, the spear going through it, I was looking at it the other day, and it looks from a distance very much like a pen. And I got to thinking rather fancifully about this. But as a visual pun, it's both a spear and a pen.
Which is perfect, yes.
Which is perfect, and I quite like that. And it's just like Shakespeare to have thought, or to have, encouraged the herald to make it look maybe like a pen. I mean, that's probably me being a bit fanciful, but it's definitely there if you go looking for it.
Well, that leads me to my next question, because when I thought about this, it was rather late in John Shakespeare's life that they are achieving this. So there had to be some forethought about the fact that William's going to have to carry this on. And I wondered if he faced any pushback once John Shakespeare died. William Shakespeare was a player, which is not a suitable occupation for a gentleman. So was there some question of whether or not he should be allowed to keep the coat of arms?
Well, it's not about him keeping it. It was a complaint that he was granted it in the first place. And this comes from the York Herald. York's my home city, so I'm always sorry about this. The York Herald, Ralph Brooke in 1601, lists 23 people complaining about them having been given coats of arms because he says they didn't really deserve them. And they include, for example, he says, someone was a fishmonger, William Sanderson. He says, William Norton was a bookbinder, and Shakespeare was a player. Also among them is Richard Cowley, an actor from Shakespeare's company, who was also, as it were, berated for being a player. But then when you think about this, the fishmonger, it turns out, was a member of one of the most ancient London guilds. And the fishmonger in question had financed the printing of the first English maps for globes. And William Norton, who was listed as a bookbinder, was in fact master of the stationer's company. So I think it's Ralph Brooke, the herald, complaining that comes out worse on this. I think he sounds like a terrible snob, and history has revealed this to be the case. And Shakespeare had every right to use those coat of arms, both in his father's lifetime and just after. In his father's lifetime, he had to display them a little differently on the outside and around New Place. So he'd have had to have a narrow band with 3 tags pendant from it across the top of the shield, which meant that my father's still alive. And then when the father died, he could remove that tag to show that he properly had the right as the eldest son to use that coat of arms.
Now, in his will, Shakespeare leaves a ceremonial sword to
He
a
does,
young
yes.
Thomas Combe. Is it pronounced Combe or Combe?
Combe, Thomas Combe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was a sword part of the granting of coat of arms? Did they get a sword as well?
No, I don't think they did, but you probably wanted to bear a sword proudly as a gentleman. And at this time, between 1570 and 1630, there were 45 gentlemen, people of gentleman status in Stratford-upon-Avon. 28 of them had been born into the title, and the other 17 were gentlemen, individuals from different families and had a trade like Shakespeare. Now, of gentlemen in that period in Stratford-upon-Avon over those 60 years, 9 carried a sword, rapier and dagger, and 4 of the 9 were gentlemen. So that doesn't suggest that you had to carry a sword if you were a gentleman. We know that Shakespeare had a sword because, as you've mentioned it, he bequeathed it in his will. So I suspect that was a very important part of how he saw his own social status. And he bequeathed it to Thomas Combe. Now, it's quite touching, this, because Thomas Combe would have been the same age as Hamlet had Shakespeare lived.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know about that part.
Yeah,
Now
they might have been like playfellows. Thomas might have been, grown up. We grew up the same time as Hamlet, basically. So they probably played together, knew each other well. The Combe family and the Shakespeares were close. So
that was a real friendship move there, yeah.
John Combe leaves Shakespeare some money in his will when he dies in 1614, for example.
But there were rules about carrying of certain kinds of weapons. So the carrying of a sword, you were really only allowed to do that if you were a gentleman. So Shakespeare having the ceremonial sword and putting it in a position of prominence was him saying, again, I have the right to be a gentleman.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
Was the coat of arms a physical object? I mean, you're saying he had the right to display it in different places.
Yes, so. And it was very carefully policed, all of this. I mean, they were handed out to us. It seems like it was quite easy to get one. I'm sure it wasn't. And we know the statistics over the centuries of how many were granted each year. And the numbers growing in Shakespeare's period, but they're not that common things to be given. They're often mocked in plays of the period. References to coats of arms pepper some of Shakespeare's plays. He really knew his heraldry, according to the characters in his plays. And it was a physical object which you could display. You could have it engraved into furniture. It was popular to put into windows like stained glass. So one can imagine that new plays that had coats of arms, I think, pretty much all over it if Shakespeare had anything to do with it. I think they were very proud of this coat of arms. And also you had a great certificate. Written on parchment with a lovely wide border, so you'd have displayed this prominently as well. So, if you had it, you very much flaunted it.
Now, I defer to your expertise with this next question because I want to allow for gaps in my research. But as I understand it, there are not any documents surviving which actually show Shakespeare was officially granted the coat of arms. And instead, we have subsequent documents that refer to Shakespeare as a gent. And we've concluded that those documents wouldn't exist if he had been denied the coat of arms. So I'm asking you to confirm the veracity of this.
I would say it's not true, and also it's more complex. So there are surviving documents which show they were granted them, but they're drafts.
Okay, so it's a technicality. I see.
So we don't have like the final certificate that I've just described on parchment. It doesn't seem to survive. The biographer René Weiss in Shakespeare Revealed suggests that this would have been a prized family object, and that Elizabeth Barnard, the granddaughter of Shakespeare, would have inherited it and taken it away with her to Northamptonshire when she moved across to Abington as Elizabeth Lady Barnard, which is perfectly plausible, but it hasn't come to light. We also have subsequent references to that application, and here we must mention our friends in the Folger Shakespeare Library, Washington, D.C. Happy Shakespeare's birthday to the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, because of their work with Michael Whitmore and Heather Wolfe in recent times, who have found in other manuscript records references to the coats of arms, Shakespeare's coat of arms, actually having been granted to Shakespeare himself, William Shakespeare himself, rather than the father, in 1602. This is after the death of the father, so maybe the reference, as it were, updates the record at the same time. And also we've got the complaint by the herald that I mentioned in 1601. So there's plenty of evidence that he was granted a coat of arms. What's really interesting from the Folgers' recent work is that they have connected the reference to Shakespeare's gentlemanly status, through John of Stratford-upon-Avon, with the fact that he, Shakespeare, is listed as a gentleman and poet in 1615. That means that you have poet, gentleman, Shakespeare, and Stratford-upon-Avon all combining to flesh out his identity even further.
Well, it fits with Shakespeare that exploring the coat of arms would come with a good story.
There you go.
Now, our conversation today has been an excellent introduction to the coat of arms, but I know there's so much more about heraldry and Shakespeare that we could explore. So what are some of your recommended resources of trustworthy sources that you would send us to look at and explore further? Obviously, the Folger Shakespeare Library is probably one of them.
And then, of course, we must mention our friend S. Schoenbaum, William Shakespeare Documentary Life. We must mention E.A.J. Honigman and Susan Brock's Playhouse Wills at Manchester University Press. That's great because it's a collection of editions, really, of wills of Shakespeare's contemporary actors and playwrights. And so they look at the social status across the board, as it were, in that book. If you want to immerse yourself in a beautiful, authoritative book about this subject, I think you can do no better than the following, which is Heralds and Heraldry in Shakespeare's England, edited by Nigel Ramsay, 2014. It's a stunning collection of essays, and it's beautifully illustrated, making clear just how rich these objects were and how interiors of different kinds of houses were decorated in the period with them. And then you might also include, my own book. Let's blow my own trumpet.
Absolutely.
Finding Shakespeare's New Place, an archaeological biography. I was the lead author on that with archaeologists William Mitchell and Kevin Coles. That's Manchester University Press. And I could go on, but I'm not going to overwhelm you with a load of stuff. But if you've got your Schoenbaum, your Ramsay, your Honigman and Brock, and your Edmondson, Mitchell and Coles, it'll get. And also, actually, let's say also Michael Wood, In Search of Shakespeare, 2002. I think probably you've got plenty to get going with.
Yes, it's an excellent reading list for exploring this topic. Thank you. Now, as you know, from your last visit to That Shakespeare Life, we ask everyone this next question. And that's what the one book you would take with you on a deserted island. And I will give you the opportunity to have a new island. Since you shared with us your one book last time, is there a book that you maybe left off of your list last time that you would want to take with you now?
By the rules of this, if you're following the Desert Island Discs rules from the UK, I'm already allowed to take the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about not taking...
No, you'll definitely have those, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I should have been prepared for this question. What shall I take? Oh, I'll take Charles Dickens's Bleak House.
No one has ever chosen Charles Dickens.
Really?
Really, you're the first. And it's an excellent choice.
So his birthday's back in February, and I tend to notice it every year. Dickens was a great Shakespearean. This is maybe a conversation for another Shakespeare Life. Nearly every page, and this is not an exaggeration, nearly every page of Dickens alludes to some Shakespeare at some point, or every chapter, let's say. Many, many hundreds of references, more in thousands of references, over 1,000 references to Shakespeare across the work of Dickens. He knew and loved his Shakespeare. He was an important muse for Dickens. And of all the Dickens novels, I love Great Expectations and Tale of Two Cities, and I love David Copperfield. But I think I'd take Bleak House because it's so quintessentially Dickens. I love its darkness. I love its humor. I love its mystery. And so, yeah, for today, Cassidy, I'll take Bleak House, please.
Excellent choice. And finding all of the references to Shakespeare in Charles Dickens' work could keep you quite busy on a dessert. Well, what's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
Well, I'm just back from the excellent Shakespeare Association of America conference, which this year took place, only finished a couple of days ago, in Washington, D.C. And there I was chairing a round table discussion with the excellent Catherine Scheil from the University of Minnesota. Our theme was Civic Shakespeare. And joining us was Michael Whitmore of the Folger Shakespeare Library, and Ewan Fernie of the Shakespeare Institute, University of Birmingham, and Zorica Nicola from the University of Belgrade. And our conversation was about Shakespeare's role in civic life, which arises out of some research that Ewan Fernie and I have been doing for a number of years now. But basically, Cassidy, that's Shakespeare-related projects which are public-facing, based on research, may have a performative element, and will be in public places which are not the usual kind of theatres or galleries, but maybe out on the streets, maybe in different and surprising contexts.
Excellent conference for sure. We'll link to the SAA as well as places you can learn more about Civic Shakespeare in the show notes for today's episode.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say also here in Stratford for Shakespeare's birthday, we're getting ready for our big civic procession through the town on the Saturday nearest the birthday, when thousands of people line the streets, and we have an actual procession through from the birthplace through to the grave to lay flowers on it for his birthday.
Oh, wonderful. Well, if you're in Stratford for Shakespeare's birthday, please celebrate for me, because I wish I could be there. So
thank you.
Well, Paul Edmondson, thank you so much for being here today and sharing with us about Shakespeare's coat of arms.
Thank you.
To see links to all of the resources mentioned in today's episode about where you can see the coat of arms, as well as the 4 amazing books that Paul mentions today that you should check out if you want to know more about Shakespeare and heraldry, and even to reread Charles Dickens's Bleak House and find all those Shakespeare references on every page that Paul mentioned today, check out the show notes for today's episode. It'll include links to all these resources, as well as extra history and places that you can learn more and find out more that we weren't able to cram into the episode today, all at cassidycash.com/episode 53. That's cassidycash.com/EP53. That's it for this week here at That Shakespeare Life. I'm Cassidy Cash, that Shakespeare girl, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.